is Rowan, and welcome to the Transmystics group. So we have had a few sessions so far of our Transmystics group, and I thought it would be helpful to do some recordings. So those of you who were unable to attend, or maybe those of you who did attend but would like to access the information, we will have this posted. And I'm planning to do recordings for the other groups as well. So you will have this as a resource to support your practice. So a little bit of an outline of what we will do today is do some defining of terms, of contemplation and other things, and sort of think about the goals of the practice. We will also do a contemplative reading from a Christian mystic and practice a contemplative practice, which today will be centering prayer. Now, because you are doing this at home, feel free to pause at any point. I will prompt you to pause in certain areas to take some moments of reflection or silence. So feel free to do whatever you feel called to do or whatever feels accessible to you as you navigate through this practice. So in general, this is going to be, for now, some of the overview of what we will do in these meetings is look at a Christian mystic, connect to a Christian mystic, and engage in a contemplative Christian practice. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't know that we have a long history of contemplatives and mystics and contemplative practices in the Christian tradition. And so hopefully this space can be a place for us to relearn or reconnect with that history and that lineage and engage with these practices. And hopefully, wherever you are with your spiritual journey, potentially these practices or these figures that we explore may be a source of support for you on your spiritual journey. So before we get into this too much, it might be helpful to take a pause now and sort of think about what brings you here today. You know, how are you entering this space in this moment? What emotions, what struggles, what joys are you carrying as you come into this contemplative practice? And what do you hope to get out of it? Are there any goals or hopes that you are bringing to this space? The other question that you can sort of sit with is thinking about how to make this space more accessible for you. Unfortunately, with many of the contemplative practices, there is sort of this suggestion of the right way of doing the practice. And yes, there may be benefits to that, but for some people, that means they are inaccessible. And so I really want to open the door for you today, explicitly, and as we go through our journey in the other groups, that you will really, you're really invited to think about how to make this accessible for you. Would that be dimming the lights, playing some music, lighting a candle? Would it be getting a nice blanket to wrap yourself up in, or a stuffy, or a or stuffed animal? Fidget toys? Would it be having your journal with you, having a cup of tea with you? Whatever would support you in your practice, and giving yourself the flexibility if you need to move around, if you need to lay down, um, whatever works for you. I will say that for myself, um, some of my goals and my hopes in this group is to cultivate a community and creativity and curiosity, and also to support people with cultivating spiritual or sacred relationship in the process. So feel free to pause here for a few moments and take some time to sit with these questions, just thinking about them, or if you want to do some journaling. So a little bit more details about the terms that we're going to be using. So in our title, we call the group Transmystics and Queering Contemplation. So what does queering mean? Queering means subverting, defying, disrupting, liberating oneself from oppressive or restrictive systems such as heteronormativity, white supremacy, patriarchy, and all the ways that institutional Christianity and the church has been invested in these systems. And so, something that we talked about in thinking about starting this group is that whether or not these figures from history or looking at these practices explicitly, they considered themselves queer as we would define it today, they were engaging in this queering process. They were challenging these systems and traditions and communities to expand on an individual level and a community level, a religious community level, to really expand their understanding of themselves and their spirituality and their relationships with God. And unfortunately, that meant that at times, some of the figures that we'll talk about have been really attacked by the church, sometimes discredited, excommunicated, arrested, imprisoned, even killed sometimes, because their views were considered so um, inflammatory or such a threat to the institution. And in some ways, you can sort of break that down in that. I think in a simple way, there's lots more that you could talk about with this, but that the contemplative practices are an avenue for us to connect directly with God or with the divine. We don't need a middleman with these practices. Maybe it's helpful to have a facilitator or a mentor, so a spiritual director to support us with some of these things, but it's a direct access route. And when you have set up an institution that is has a hierarchy that sort of holds that you need to go through a middleman, you need to go through religious leadership in order to access God, that this is considered a threat. And that's way what some of these mystics and contemplatives were bringing to the table, are these teachings that they had through direct access. And sometimes that was what saved them, is to say, this wasn't from book learning. This is something I got directly from God. I mean, there's lots of different stories of how people fought back against these institutions historically. And so I'm excited to share some of that history. But just to note that in and of itself, these practices really challenge some of the systems that we're navigating, some of those systems that, unfortunately, for some of us, have pushed us more to the margins. So, different ways we can think about contemplation is that it is deep listening, it's listening for God, the deeper self, the sacred indwelling, or that place within us where we are connected to the divine. It can be a sacred pause, encountering oneness, union with God. And then mysticism, just like contemplation, they both have a long history in the Christian tradition. And unfortunately, both have suppressed or neglected history. We'll look at these things like, why didn't many of us didn't learn about this growing up, or there's not much discussion. And so that's something to sort of ask ourselves, is why? Why is this sort of a hidden in a way? Um, and so mysticism is the practice or experiences of intimacy with God. Centering prayer, which is the practice we will look at today, is a way of cultivating a deeper relationship with God. It can be a path of transformation, an exercise of faith, hope, and selfless love. It's not just limited to the felt presence of God, but rather could be seen as a deepening of faith in God's abiding presence. So it's an invitation to rest in God beyond thoughts, words, and emotions. So, one of the questions we can carry today and in our other groups is, how can we continue to queer these practices? So, in and of themselves, there is an element of queerness. There's an element of challenging some of these institutions, and in a way, us stepping into these practices as queer, trans, and non binary individuals. We are queering the practice. But I also want to open the door for us to continue to sit with and explore, how can we continue that process of queering, these practices so that they become more inclusive and expansive and honoring of who we are. So, what is centering prayer? So, in centering prayer, excuse me, you will choose a sacred word as a symbol of your intention to consent to God's abiding presence and action within yourself. So, what is a word that symbolizes that intention to really open to God or to the divine? And something I want to say with many of these, for these practices, they are very old. And so often the language, unfortunately, is binary and the language is very God focused. And so please, again, feel free to invite whatever language fits for you in terms of the relationship and the connection that you would like to build with this practice. So, some examples of words that you might use are God or Jesus, Mother, Mary, love, listen, peace, silence, trust. So, think about a word for yourself, what really symbolizes that intention to open to this relationship. What the practice can look like, the suggestion is to sit comfortably with eyes closed, settle briefly and silently, and introduce that sacred word as the symbol. And then, when engaged with your thoughts, and by thoughts they mean body sensations, feelings, images, and reflections, return ever so gently to the sacred word. So, for those of you that have practiced mindfulness meditation before, this may sound kind of familiar. You're finding your anchor point. And for a lot of people, for example, that may be focusing on the breath, maybe focusing on body sensations, maybe focusing on something around you, and then you're focusing on it, then at some point you notice your mind has wandered away. Oh, you've noticed you've wandered, and then you try to gently, non-judgmentally bring yourself back to whatever piece of the present moment you're focusing on. Your mind wanders, then you come back, and this is where we're really building the muscle with mindfulness. So it's not necessarily a bad thing that we've drifted away. It's just part of the practice. So this will also happen with this practice, and it does carry that similar element. However, there's another layer to this, the layer of being actively in relationship, acknowledging that you are in relationship and holding that intention to open to it and open to whatever that relationship brings in the moment, whether it's some type of communication, or learning or feeling or experience or sensation, that you are not just doing that mindful attending to or anchoring into that word, and you are also holding this relational dynamic. And that is what this practice is really inviting, to actively be engaged and experiencing that relationality between you and whatever spiritual or sacred relationship you are wanting to take this prayer practice to. So, again, I want to bring up that point about accommodations. So there's a suggestion to sit and close your eyes. For some people, that may not work for them, or generally, or in this moment. And so I want you to sort of think about, for you, what's accessible for you. What would be supportive for you in terms of engaging this practice? Would it be movement? Would it be taking breaks? Would it be uh, maybe you're sitting silently some, and then you're journaling or you're creating something? Maybe you're lighting candles. Maybe you're doing um, some kind of a practice that helps you to stay present with this. So, um, in our first meeting, someone brought up maybe they are writing, maybe you're writing the word over and over to help you stay with it. So there's different ways that you can engage with this practice. And I really want to open the door. And that is part of creating a practice that actually honors our uniqueness and who we are and what we need mentally, emotionally, and physically. So this is the practice. And then Some people at the end of that prayer period will then remain in silence with their eyes closed for a couple of minutes. And so that's an overview of what the centering prayer can look like. And if you would like to pause here, you can and sort of get yourself set up, get your supplies, get your supports set up to help you as we move towards engaging in the centering prayer practice. Before that, we will go into our contemplative reading. But if you'd like to pause here, you can to get the things that you need to support your practice. Right, so the mystic we'll be talking about today is Mechthild of Magdeburg. And I hope I'm saying that correctly, but that's how I say her name. Mechthild of Magdeburg lived and worked for about 40 years as a beguine in Magdeburg. She was born in a castle near a city, joined the medieval poverty movement at the age of 20, and consequently chose to descend from the castle where she grew up to live in the city. Up to today, she is famous for her book, The Flowing Light of the Godhead, that she wrote in Middle Low German, the vernacular and the language of the poor. Her writings unite bridal mysticism of the Song of Songs in the Old Testament with poetry of the courtly love lyric, creating a new poetry which reveals comprehensibly her immediate experience of God. If you're not familiar with the history of the Beguines, I would definitely encourage you to look them up. They were groups of women that formed what they call beguinages, where they lived together and supported each other. It was sort of an alternative route, a less restrictive route, or more accessible route than going to on to become a nun. And they did many community work supporting those that were experiencing poverty, working with education, working in healthcare. And there were periods where they were supported by governments, but then at some point were viewed as threats. I always find it interesting that one of the cases I looked at that someone was charged with or they were accused of is teaching people things they could not possibly understand and that was harmful. So the Beguines really wanted everyone to have access to religious materials, to engage in sacred relationship, and to make that more accessible to the community. And unfortunately, at some point, that became a threat, and their existence became more threatened. And when I had researched them, I saw that one of the last ones closed in the early 2000s. So coming from the medieval period up till then is a pretty long existence, but very interesting history if you're not familiar with it. So now I will do a reading from Mechthild. So maybe at this point, think about whatever might help you or support you to take in this reading. If it's reading along with me out loud, I will read through it a couple of times. If it's writing it, if it's just closing your eyes and listening. I who am divine am truly in you. I can never be sundered from you. However far we be parted, never can we be separated. I am in you, and you are in me. We could not be any closer. We two are fused into one, poured into a single mold. Thus, unwearied, we shall remain forever. I who am divine am truly in you. I can never be sundered from you. However far we be parted, never can we be separated. I am in you, and you are in me. We could not be any closer. We two are fused into one, poured into a single mold. Thus, unwearied, we shall remain forever. Now there is the invitation to go into your centering prayer practice. Whether or not you chose a word from before, or there's a word that stood out to you from the reading today, to select a word and remember, however it feels accessible for you to select that word, focus on that word as a symbol of inviting that awareness and that connection and acknowledgement of that sacred relationship, whichever relationship you would like to open to connect with today. So that could be sitting silently with your eyes closed, it could be laying down, it could be journaling, whatever feels accessible for you today. One of the questions that we sat with was, how long shall we practice? And the suggestion is to sit for 20 minutes. However, that is a long time if you're not used to doing this. So, whatever feels accessible to you, if it's a couple minutes, if it's 5 minutes, if it's 10 minutes, to set yourself a timer or just to sit with it and let that natural process go till you reach a point where you feel like, if you have that flexibility to stop. If it's helpful to start and end with a bell, you can do that as well. But now, if you'd like to pause and however long you'd like to take with the practice, take a pause here and engage in the centering prayer practice. Now that you've finished your practice, this might be a helpful point to do some reflections. Reflect on your practice, maybe thinking back to where you started, what was your intention, what was your goal today? Um, was that something that you accomplished? Was that something that you struggled with? Was there something that you noticed about your experience that you want to hang on to or was unexpected, or maybe you'd like to dig into more later? So take a pause here and just reflect on your practice. Right, so I wanted to also share these are some references if you want to look any more into these practices. Contemplative Outreach has um, more information about centering prayer practice. These are some other resources that I pulled from for the information in the presentation today. So feel free to look into those. Thank you again for joining me for this practice. I hope you enjoyed this video and that it was supportive of your spiritual practice. Stay tuned for more videos of our other groups and feel free to join us for the live group if you're able to. And if anything comes up in this recording or future ones, and you would like to reach out, feel free to reach out personally if you have any questions or could use some additional support. I do also offer individual spiritual direction sessions for the TMC community. So feel free to reach out with any questions or concerns, or if you'd like to go deeper. Thank you for joining me.